Well, let's put some of that together now. The playbook, how you can give your employees tools to improve their performance, the environment they face, we've heard that from before, and look at how you keep your sales teams on top of their game, give them shortcuts, deal with the turnover that we saw potentially in some organizations, and we're going to look at the engaged organization, because our next thinker has written a great deal about this. It's the core of his new book, which is titled The Engaged Organization. He sort of uses a mixture of common sense, really, and special insight to give us ideas as to how to make our salespeople super salespeople and keep them doing that. Stefan Wissenbach, if I can ask you to come up to the stage now, and please, ladies and gentlemen, give a big a round of applause for Stefan Wissenbach.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. So we're going to talk more about people than technology today. I love people, and I'm going to talk I'm a lucky boy, really, because my passion is engagement, and I get to stand and talk to people about my passion, which is a real treat. And the world has really woken up over the last few years about what it means when you have an engaged organization, when you have team members that are engaged and are pulling together. I'm not going to talk about me today. I want to talk about you, and I want to give you some value. Today I want to teach you how you can become engaged, create an engaged organization, the component parts that go together, and why engagement is an energy source that you can use to create exceptional outcomes. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is start with some foundations. One of the best ways of learning is through the power of questions. And I've built and sold a number of businesses based on asking great questions. Every month, my business engagement multiplier asks thousands of employees great questions. Now, great questions lead to great answers, and great answers lead to great outcomes. And today, I'm going to pose to you just 10 questions. And I want you to not be put off by the simplicity. The answers to these questions, or your answers to these questions, will deliver the transformation that you seek. And whether you own a bit, well, in fact, let's get a show of hands for the audience. So can I have a show of hands if you're a business owner? Excellent. If you're a leader in a business? Excellent. And a team member in a business? Everyone else? Perfect. Okay. So as we go through today and I pose these questions, I want you to think of them in the context of the business that you work in or that you run and that you own. And please don't be put off by the simplicity, okay? I love this quote from Steve Jobs, one of my business heroes. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work really hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it, because when you get there, in the end, you can move mountains. Now, I've worked really hard to simplify the topic which is often spoken about now, which is employee engagement. I've worked really hard to make it simple so you can move mountains. And today, I not only want you to move mountains, but I also want you to be lions. And more of that in just a moment. First question that I want you to think about is, and it's a question I've asked business owners for years, and once again, don't be put off by the simplicity. In your opinion, what are the 3 biggest areas in your business right now that would be measurably improved with greater levels of engagement? We've heard a lot about technology. Human ingenuity is fantastic. Let's not forget that. So what are the 3 areas in your business right now, or in the role that you play, that would be measurably improved with greater levels of engagement? When I ask this question of business owners and leaders, we get a whole raft of answers. But in my experience, the biggest challenge facing business owners today is how to attract and retain productive talent. In other words, hiring and keeping happy, efficient people. That's what we want, right? If we're working in a business, we want to work with happy, efficient people. If we own a business or run a team, we want happy, efficient people. And there's some interesting data around this. I've just come back from the States last week, and it's interesting that the stats here are actually, in some of the areas, a little worse, and I expected it to be the other way around. But 83% of leaders now say that talent acquisition is the #1 priority. This was a LinkedIn a very extensive LinkedIn survey done very recently. 58% are experiencing difficulty hiring. I don't know whether that applies to anyone in the room, and over 50% find it really hard to attract key talent. It's getting harder and harder to attract key talent. So a question for you is, what actions are you taking today to ensure that you're able to attract the best talent in an increasingly competitive marketplace? And if we talk about retaining talent, that's getting harder too, because we've heard about technology this morning, and technology is a great enabler, and I have a technology business, I understand it, but there are websites out there right now that are designed to tell your team members and your colleagues and your employees that there's better jobs out there, and they absolutely thrive on disengagement. 77% of people now apparently search online, and the thing that did make me laugh when I was reading this is 40% of them do it whilst they're in bed. Surely there's better things to do. And 37% search from work. So whilst you're here, your team members back at work may be looking for jobs, or 1/3 of them probably are. 69% of people would leave for less than a 5% pay increase. Yet interestingly, when someone's engaged, it takes more than 20% to get their attention. And in the UK, and these numbers are actually quite a lot worse than the latest stats in the US, 70% of UK staff are open to a new role, and 24% are actively looking. And we heard just now, it's really expensive. Depending on the complexity of the role, 30 to 200% of annual salary to replace someone. So businesses all over the world have money disappearing out the back door every day simply because they don't engage their people. So if 70% of your people are open to job offers or colleagues and 24% are actively looking, what is that costing you? Now there is a happy end to this story, and that is an engaged organisation. It's the topic of my latest book. It's something I'm passionate about. And the world's sort of been talking about engagement ever such a lot now. It's become a bit of a buzzword. It's a bit like a fridge magnet. So I'd like to explain to you what engagement is in my terms. So I want you to imagine you have the best seats on the centre line at the home stadium for the team that you've supported since you were this high. And it's the biggest match of the decade. You've been building up to it. You've been clearing your diary. You're there most of the time. You're on your feet, cheering. You're really absolutely in the moment. Your head's in your hands if there's a fumble or a foul. You're absolutely present, focused, and energized. I want you to imagine now exactly the same sport, team that you don't so much care about, Sunday afternoon, on the telly, been out for a great lunch with friends, sitting on the couch, playing with a dog, maybe on social media, maybe even having a nap. The difference? Purely your level of engagement. In the first instance, you're present, focused, and energized, and in the second, not so much. Now, I went round a call centre not long ago that looked something like this, and it was after hours, and as I was walking around with the owner, I said, "How many people actually work here?" And he said, "Well, good question, about 45. I said, "Crazy, look, there must be over 100 desks here." He said, "No, you didn't ask me how many people work here, you asked me how many people actually work here." And it's the sad reality, right? People are showing up, and they're not actually present, focused, and energized. And when you get them present, focused, and energized, that's when the magic happens. It's much better working with people that are present, focused, and energized, right? As opposed to the opposite. And so the world's woken up to this, as I mentioned earlier. Something wrong with the clicker? Can we? The world's woken up to this. So I launched, I've been consulting on this topic for over 20 years now. I've had the pleasure of working with lots of great businesses and business owners. And about 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago, I decided that I would launch a technology platform that could help any business anywhere in the world measurably improve employee engagement every 90 days. And it works. About 3 years ago, we did some work with Google to say, how many searches are there a month online for employee engagement? And back then, it was just over 10,000 a month. I thought, that's quite a big number. Over the following 18 months, it went past 1 million, and it's now well past 2.5 million a month. So you can see there's this trend where people are realizing the power of it. How am I going to explain it? I'm going to use a topic that I was never very good at school, so it's great to stand on a stage and talk about nuclear physics, to explain something which I find really simple, which is employee engagement. So in nuclear reactions, the most common form of reaction is a fission reaction. And we all know that because it involves the splitting apart of the atom. Really powerful. It's what you have in atom bombs, it's what you have in nuclear reactors. Not as powerful, however, as its very close cousin, fusion, which involves exactly the opposite. Fusion is forcing atoms together. So one's pulling them apart, the other one's forcing them together. Now, fusion reactions are significantly more powerful, and the best example I can give you is the sun. That's what's occurring on the surface of the sun. And scientists say if we could harness just 1 second's worth of the sun's energy, we'd have enough energy to power the world's entire energy needs for over 500,000 years. Isn't that a completely bonkers statistic? Really hard for us to comprehend. 1 second of the energy, 500,000 years. So it's pretty powerful. And right now in France, and this is absolutely worth a Google, if you Google ITER, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, there's a group of what people used to say were mad French scientists, but I don't think they're so mad. I love these guys, and I've been talking about them for a few years, and I really hope they pull it off. And they're really close to pulling off, in a reactor, a fusion reaction. So what occurs on the surface of the sun? And if and when they do this, the way that we think about energy will be transformed. And the great thing is that we already have the existing infrastructure in place. All the power lines are there, the lights, the systems. We're just changing the power source. And engagement's exactly the same. You all work in businesses or have businesses. You already have offices, you have people, you have clients, you have systems, you have processes. You just need to shoot that engagement energy through it to create real value and transform what you're doing. And you do it in exactly the same way as fusion. And a lot of businesses spend time, and we will know this because we've all worked in businesses where they thrive on separating and having people in silos and pulling things apart. And you do it by pulling things together. And it starts with something at the core, which is now often spoken about but much misunderstood, which is an engaged purpose. And what you do is you unite around that engaged purpose, the owners, the leaders, and the employees, and that's when you get the energy. That's when we talk about customer experiences. That's when customers get engaged. You don't go out trying to create engaged customers. You focus on creating an engaged organization, and engaged customers become a byproduct. We all know what it's like to go into a coffee shop where you get great service or you don't. The employees are engaged or they're not. And when you have an experience where you deal with an engaged employee or team member, you want to go back. It increases the value. So my question to you, for the business that you work in, or the business that you own, or the team that you run, are you pulling things apart, or are you fusing them together? Let's just talk a bit about the power of purpose. I said it's much misunderstood. So the best example I can give you is we go back to 1962, and President John F. Kennedy is visiting the NASA Space Center. And he sees at the back of the room a janitor that might have looked something like this, standing there with a broom, and he walks over to him in an effort to be familiar and inconspicuous. He says, "Hi, I'm Jack Kennedy. What do you do here?" To which the janitor replies, "Well, Mr. President," he said, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." 3 men digging a ditch. Walk up to the first one, say, "What are you doing?" He says, "Digging a ditch." Say to the second one, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm making some foundations." Say to the third one, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, sir, I am building a cathedral." Same job. So what would your staff say? What would your colleagues say? And would they all say the same thing? So let's look at the stats behind purpose. Once again, overwhelming evidence on the power of it. Ernst & Young did a big assessment on this recently. 85% of purpose-driven companies, revenue went up. 42% with no purpose, revenue went down. Probably need a purpose. 77% of millennials now choose workplace. We heard about millennials just now. They choose workplace due to purpose. It's more about meaning than money. So what are you doing to engage millennials? Do you have a purpose? And what we found at Engagement Multiplier is that companies that score, or where their team members score that they have an engaged purpose, 86% of them are automatically scored as being an engaged organisation. Purpose is so, so important. And what it does is it provides a connection to something bigger. And the way I like to explain this is what I call the Friday night test. So you've just employed a new team member, and they go home and they're sat down with friends and family, they're having dinner, and they say, you started a new job this week. How is it? What do you do there? And the words that then come out of their mouth tell a very important story. So, are you building a cathedral? Are you putting a man on the moon? What are you doing? So, an engaged purpose has, for me, 3 key elements. And it's important to realise here that this is not written for the shareholders, it's not written for the owners, it's not written for the customers. It's written for the team members that show up every day, your colleagues in your business, that are there to make that business successful and grow. And it covers, first of all, what you do and who you do it for, why you do it, and how you enjoy doing it. In the words of your team members, in the words of the colleagues that you work with. Very, very important. We're just about to print another version of our Engaged Purpose Guide. This one's been out for a couple of years, and we've spent over the last 18 months an extensive amount of time, money and research working with lots of engaged organisations that have done a fabulous job of creating an engaged purpose. And we've distilled it down into 5 simple steps that any organisation can follow. And it would be my absolute pleasure if anyone would like one of these guides, if you let my team know on the desk outside. As soon as they go to print in a couple of weeks, we will send you one, and we'll also email you one because we live in a digital age. So let's talk about disengaged employees and engaged employees. If we were to list the characteristics of a disengaged employee, we might have been one, we might have worked with them, we may have them in our team. And the same with engaged employees, we could list the characteristics. If we put them side by side, what I do when I'm talking to a room full of business owners that I want to be honest, I will say, can I have a show of hands for anyone that's got people in the red column? And if I'm dealing with honest people, most of the hands in the room go up. And I'll say, keep your hands up if you think it's more than 10%, take them down if you think it's less. Keep your hands up if you think it's more than 25%, take them down if it's less. If you think it's more than 50%, leave your hands up. If you think it's less, take them down. There's normally not many hands in the room at over 50%. Does anyone want to have a guess what percentage of team members are disengaged at work? Good number. We're just going to come back to that. The problem is that most people think of a disengaged employee as looking like this, when actually they're in disguise. They show up on time, they say the right things, but they're not present, focused, and energized. They're not like they are on the sidelines, watching that game. They're not bringing their whole selves to work. And if that's you, it's not enjoyable. You want to work in an organization where you do feel present, focused, and energized. Great answer on the percentage, because I'm on a crusade to help 100 million people become measurably more engaged.
What figure did she say?
87. Wow. Okay? And so a couple of years ago, Gallup published their biannual employee engagement assessment, and 87% of employees were deemed not engaged at work. Tragic. 13% of people are happy. Now, I can say this here because I'm not in the States, but in America, more than 13% of the population think that there's going to be a zombie apocalypse. So that's more than the people that are happy going to work. So it's a big market for me, which is great. And then Gallup's latest assessment came out recently, and it had got better. 67% now. Still a bad number. But here's the interesting thing. When you read the small print, it's actually very sad, because it says of the 67%, 51% are just not engaged. And 16% are actively disengaged, and they're destroying the good work that the 33% are doing. So what's that doing to the business that you work in or own? I mean, not good. Has anyone heard of Tony Say? If you haven't, I would recommend strongly you get his book. It's called Delivering Happiness. Really gets this. He's a business leader that gets employee engagement intuitively. built his business from zero to sold it to over $1 billion to Amazon, basically selling shoes online. And Tony has a really interesting approach. You go for a job at Zappos, after 3 weeks you get called into an office and you're offered and given a check for $3,000 and said, if you want to leave now, take the check, been a great experience. Or, we'll keep the check and you can stay. Some people take the check. And I was with Tony at a conference, and someone said to him, Tony, you're mad, you're giving away $3,000 checks. He says, no, are you mad? He said, it's saving me money every time I write one. Think of what it costs to take that person on, have them be in the business and not be engaged. So the benefits are overwhelming. Reduced turnover, people sort of obviously stay. And it's interesting, 7 out of 10 people would rather see their boss fired than have a pay rise. Judging by the laughter in the room, you're either a boss that's nervous or you have one. Morale goes up. It's always better working in a business where the morale is higher. Customer satisfaction improves. I said earlier, it's a byproduct. And productivity rockets. You know, engaged organisation, if we want to talk about the sort of the benefits, the money, 43% more productive and grow profits up to 3 times faster. You know, the prize is so big financially as well as emotionally. But how do you do it? How do you do it? Well, I realised 20 odd years ago that this subject that everyone else was thinking was really woo-woo, touchy-feely, you know, making people happy, I realised it was absolutely quantifiable. And I created a system, and it's what I write about in my book, and a scorecard that enables you very quickly to measure how engaged your business is. And one of the things that we've done for ISM is we've created a platform which you can access for free and in less than 10 minutes get your score, or score the business that you're in, which is always illuminating. And get resources for free that you can download to help improve the situation. If you can measure something, you can improve it. Now here's an example of something which, measured over time, has improved exponentially.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. Tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
They've done a really good job of attracting and retaining productive talent, right? Because they also have more people. So, first thing you have to do, if you want to improve anything, as we know, is you've got to be able to measure it. And so we just created a simple way of measuring the engagement levels in an organization and measuring those components that I spoke about earlier and how you create fusion. Measuring how engaged the owners are, measuring how engaged the leaders are, how engaged the employees are, and how engaged the purpose is. And I firmly believe that the answers to how to improve your business are within the business already in the minds of the people that are doing the work day in, day out. They know what to do. And if you've heard about the Japanese principle of Kaizen, which is small changes, it's very easy for team members when you provide them with structure and framework where they feel safe and you ask them how things can be improved, they tell you, and they're often lots of small changes, but when you layer those up over time, the effect is transformational on the business. Your people have the answers. But once you ask people for information and feedback, then you've got to be prepared to take action. And then you need to repeat. There's no such thing as an annual survey. I hate them. Why would you take a pulse once a year and be at the risk of, perhaps there's just been a tragedy in the business, you've just won a big contract, it's going to influence the scores. So we recommend very strongly taking an assessment on a quarterly basis. So measure, listen, take action, repeat. So how do you currently, accurately, and frequently measure engagement in your business? How does your business do it? Does it do it at all? And what listening systems are in place where people feel safe to be able to provide candid and honest feedback about what's going on? Because people turn up wanting to be engaged. It's organisations that disengage them, and yet often known as how my team aren't engaged. Well, I say, well, when you point the finger, notice how many are pointing back at you. People want to be engaged. So what listening systems do you have in place? And how do you demonstrate to your team that you're taking action when they provide valuable feedback? And then, are you brave enough? The leaders and owners in the room here, I ask you if you're brave enough. The team members, I ask you if you're brave enough to be able to provide feedback. It takes bravery. And we say, are you a pussycat or a lion? And it's interesting. I was interviewed recently for an entrepreneur's radio channel in the US, and I said, this isn't for everyone. Creating an engaged organisation, the prize is absolutely huge, but most business owners, in my experience, quite like to sort of, I said to them, we don't want to ask everyone what's going on. It'll uncover all the problems. I'm like, do you not think they're talking about it already? It's just that the only person that's not involved in that conversation is you. And the great thing about asking people and understanding what's going on and being brave enough to get feedback is that you get great answers. So what is the one area in your business that you should know more about? Simple question, but think about it. My coach, my dear coach, Dan Sullivan, I've been traveling out to Chicago every 90 days for 11 and a half years now, just done my 80th trip, and I now have an office there and have a business there. Dan's America's leading entrepreneurial coach. I see him every 90 days. And it was working with Dan 7 years ago that I came up with the idea for Engagement Multiplier. And Dan has a wonderful phrase. He says, your eyes only see and your ears only hear what your mind is looking for. You must have had this where you suddenly thought, I'm going to go on holiday here. Unusual location. All of a sudden you keep seeing adverts for it. Or I want to buy that car, and then you see them everywhere. Or that pet, you see them everywhere. So your eyes only see and your ears only hear what your mind is looking for. So my question is, what is it that you're looking for? And are you paying attention in your business to the right things? Now, I'm going to play a clip here now which is old. And I suspect that a number of you have seen it before. It's an awareness test. If you have seen it before, then you should be very good at paying attention and getting the number right. And if you haven't seen it before, let's see how you do.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
So right now, are there problems in your business? Are there bears that you can't even see because you don't know where to look? Or are there opportunities in your business that you're not able to capitalize on because you don't know where to look? I said earlier, Steve Jobs, simple can be harder than complex. Okay? It takes a great deal of hard work to get your thinking clean so you can make it simple. And creating an engaged organization just requires focus and simplicity. There's a lot of noise out there about this at the moment, but I absolutely believe that if you focus on measuring key areas, listening to your team members, taking action on their feedback, the results are fabulous. We've covered a lot today, and they say, don't they, that knowledge is power, and I like to add to that, and you've probably heard this before, only when applied. So how do you attract and retain productive talent? Well, the answer, unsurprisingly, is an engaged organization. And I have bought about 50 copies of my latest book, The Engaged Organization, which will be a pleasure to give away at the stand. If you're interested in understanding how you can create an engaged organization, all you have to do is what's in the book. And if you'd like a free engagement assessment with your entire company, that's something else that we're prepared to do using our platform for ISM. And there's cards on the table if you would like to take advantage of that. But as with anything in life that's worth having, if you want it, you have to go for it. It requires bravery. And here's an example, which I think is fabulous, of somebody displaying bravery and courage and absolutely going for it.
We chose Georgia Tech because we want to do the impossible. And this school is equipped with the resources and faculty to help us do just that. And so, in the words of Sir Isaac Newton, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Georgia Tech is proud of its many traditions, but the one I find most exciting is our tradition of excellence. Our mission as students is not to follow in the footsteps of the astronauts, Nobel Prize laureates, and presidents who graduated before us, but to exceed their footsteps, crush the shoulders of the giants upon whom we stand. We here are all such innovative people, so I am telling you, if you want to change the world, you're at Georgia Tech. You can do that. If you want to build the Iron Man suit, you're at Georgia Tech. You can do that. If you want to play theme music during your convocation speech like a badass, we're at Georgia Tech. We can do that. I am doing that.
There's a very good reason that you play that at the end of your presentation. But when you leave later, and it's not as sunny today, but when you go outside and you feel the sun on your face next time, I want you to remember that's fusion. That's how you create an engaged organization, by bringing together owners, leaders, and employees around and uniting them around a purpose. Add in, measure, listen, take action, repeat, and a healthy dose of bravery and courage, and you will have a prize that is wonderful. So I wish you all of the success in the world, and I hope you all leave here as lions. Thank you very much.
Absolutely splendid and inspiring too. Stefan, you're okay to take a few questions now, yeah, for the next
Sure.
10 minutes. I've got one for you from the start, which is, now listen, I know you're not going to give it all away in one presentation. You've got a company to earn profits for. You've got books to sell and so on. But just to be a bit naughty to start
We're not
with.
selling books today, we're giving them away.
Oh, bless you. Oh, well, that's fine. I'm going to sit down and not ask any more questions. No, it's this. It's things are quantifiable. Things you must measure. You must listen to your staff. I mean, some of those are concepts that go right back to time and motion studies and guys with stopwatches and maybe the First World War that was happening, and also the suggestion box in the factory foundry. So how is what you're telling us new, and how should it be put together?
I'm not very original. None of my stuff's new. It's just all simple, and it's really easy to implement. And we already know what to do. It's just that we've stopped doing what's obvious. We've stopped doing it. I mean, technology is great, and I use technology as an enabler. It takes team members less than 10 minutes via their handheld device every 90 days to tell you what they really think about what's going on in the business and to score it. One of the things that you have to do is you have to make it confidential and anonymous. People have to feel safe, and you get the best feedback, and people don't abuse that. They don't abuse that. So yeah, there's very little original stuff here. It's all other ideas from other people, but I've taken the best and I've put it together and I've distilled it down into a formula that really works. So,
let's get some questions from the audience. Woman in white, just in the centre. And put some more hands up, chaps, so that we can get the mic to you nice and quick.
I was just wondering, after running an engagement survey, how much of the data do you really would let available for your employees?
Great question. So one of the things that I didn't have time to talk about today is what we call the ROI, the return on investment for team members. And if you've ever worked in a company where you've participated in the annual employee engagement survey, that's taken quite a lot of time, and you probably don't get to see the results for ages, and when you do see them, you're not sure whether it's really the true results and whether they've distilled everything properly. So when I started my business, I said the ROI for the employee has to be significant. So how do we make that true? It has to take less than 10 minutes every 90 days. They have to instantly be able to see the results. So every employee on our platform has their own private dashboard that only they can access. It's cloud-based. And when the assessment closes, they get to see how the organisation scored as a whole. Okay? It's one of the reasons why I say to owners and leaders, I only want to work with you if you're brave, because you're going to get scored every 90 days. My team members score me every 90 days. Last quarter, my score went down. So I now show up and think, okay, I need to bring my A game. So how many of us get scored every 90 days and then are able to focus on that? So owners and leaders are getting scored, and so the employees get to see how everyone else scored, so it's the collective, and alongside that they get to see how they scored. There's an interesting thing here, because a dynamic that works that I didn't appreciate when I built the company, that engaged employees like the fact that their score is higher than everyone else. And the disengaged employees every 90 days are getting the mirror held up in front of them and it says, I don't know whether I think the same way as everyone else here. And people like to be in communities, so they tend to do one of two things. They either tend to start raising their game to get their score up so that they're with the rest, or they take their disengagement elsewhere.
Do they?
They do. I was speaking at a conference in Chicago 2 years ago, and I didn't know who was in the room. It was just a group of entrepreneurs. I had someone stand up at the back. He said, thank you, you've made it really easy for me to sort the wheat from the chaff. And I said, well, I didn't realize that he was in the room. He's a client on our platform. He said, people have voted themselves off the island. I don't have to make that difficult decision anymore, because those people in disguise that we showed you earlier, right, they are in disguise. But when they get their score, they can see the truth. But you don't know whether they're bringing their whole selves to work or not. So they get the opportunity to vote themselves off. Because, look, it's common sense, right? We all like working with team members that are engaged. It makes going to work a joy. Solving problems together, using technology.
Does this work big organisation, small organisation, private sector, public sector? Because I remember being part of a large organisation where there were some people determined to stay there until they're dead, doing as little as possible.
Yeah. So my preference...
No names.
My preference is to purely work with brave, caring, identifiable owners and leaders of growth-focused organisations. The platform works in other businesses, but one of the problems in, and I can't name the name, but of a large accountancy firm in the UK that we worked with briefly, all of the people at the top said one thing, and everyone else was building their CVs and working out the next career move, and the sort of the turnover was relatively high. So you really need to have leaders and owners that team members can rally behind and lead the charge. And it's much easier to do that in an organisation that's entrepreneurially led or entrepreneurially run. So I didn't talk today about, and it's where I'll just mention it, Alcoa, I was in America, aluminium, not aluminum, company of America. Worth Googling the story about that business and how, by focusing on purpose, a legendary CEO came in and improved the market capitalisation by 27 billion. So it can be done, but it's harder where you don't have brave owners and leaders at the helm.
This gentleman there.
I was on. Thanks, Stefan. I thought it was a great talk. I just want to understand, why limit the feedback to once every 90 days, and what would you say to organisations that want to measure engagement more frequently than that?
So our platform does a scoring every 90 days, and then the owners and leaders will then communicate to the team members what they're going to do to improve things or where they're going to take action. And then the team members get to score again 90 days later to see how they did. 24/7, we have a suggestion box tool open where team members can at any time of day or night provide feedback on ideas or areas where they think improvements can be made and make comments. And our experience is that as team members are on the platform a bit longer, that gets used more and more and more. And the organisation can use it. I just did it recently, mid-cycle, to send out asking people for feedback on a particular event we were having, and can they give their comments, and using the tool to have that confidential anonymous loop.
One more question. A couple more questions, actually. No? Okay, well, that's good. You're around all day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.